Electrocast.
So I don't need to do the theme song anymore because you already made it.
No, you can do a new theme song for every time if you want.
What up, and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris, and I'm here with my older brother
Wesley.
And today we are discussing pain and glory.
Dolor y Gloria.
Don't do that.
Pedro Almodóvar. Antonio Banderas.
You've actually been always really good with accents and character voices.
I'm Mexican.
Impressions. What does that have to do with anything?
Actually, nothing, because they're Spanish, not Mexican. Within my range.
Pain and Glory got a grip of Goya Awards. What's a Goya Award?
Goya is the Spanish Oscars.
Is that like the bomb?
It doesn't really register. There are only a few big ones, right? Oscars, Golden Globes, which don't count. Caesars are French. Berlin has the Golden Bear, I think.
Yeah.
But Goya's, we don't get a lot of Spanish cinema here, I don't feel like. Antonio Banderas has said that he came to Hollywood and he did this for a long time, and then he went back to Spain, and he hadn't worked with Pedro Almodóvar in like 18 years until The Skin I Live In.
I didn't really know much about Pain and Glory, but the thing that I knew about and what gave it credibility for me was the fact that Almodóvar had directed it, and yet now that I look at his filmography, I don't see a ton of stuff that I've seen before. So why do I know him? Why is Almodóvar an entertainment household name?
Certainly in Spain he is. He's an institution in Spain. And a lot of his movies have carried over because of their renown in Spain. Pain and Glory is no exception. It's been around for almost a year, just about a year now. And it didn't hit theaters in America until October. And picked up a little bit of steam with Oscar recognition for Antonio Banderas for actor. But he's been an award staple for most of his movies. Almodóvar's name was the reason we saw The Skin I Live In together. A little bit awkward.
We saw that together?
Yeah.
When? Since when do we go see movies in the theater together?
Since before kids. At least,
The Skin I Live In came out in 2011.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. So I would have been 20.
Whatever, yeah. I think I was in my late teens.
Okay, so we watched Pain and Glory. So let's talk about, I think that this is a movie we can break down technically, unless you want to jump into story.
Well, I guess preface it by saying I didn't know anything about the movie going in. Did you?
No, other than the fact that Antonio Banderas was nominated for a Best Actor.
Right. I didn't know that this movie was autobiographical.
Oscar. Is it autobiographical?
It is. It's the character that Antonio Banderas plays is based on Pedro Almodóvar. Now, there's
basically this is like Almodóvar's answer to Roma.
Yeah, this was his more personal film. He's made other films. I think Voltaire was his most personal film, as I understand it, and then he made, of course, All About My Mother, which was all about his mother.
He's got some mom issues because that makes its way into Pain and Glory too.
Yep.
So, okay, you didn't know that it was autobiographical.
Nope. And
you figured it out by watching it or research?
After the fact.
Okay, so you watched it and you were like, that was a very specific, intimate story, and then you read it that it was autobiographical?
I had inklings, but the way the film wraps up, I started to understand, okay, maybe this is not about a filmmaker, but rather he's breaking the fourth wall, doing the thing with the boom mic, and Penelope Cruz and the actor who plays the little boy.
Though that wasn't much of a twist, I was pretty relieved when I found out that was, what was the name of the film? The film within the film? The First Temptation? The First Desire.
Yeah, First Desire.
Okay, so when they revealed it, I was like, okay, not really a meaningful twist, but I was really relieved because Penelope Cruz is like so beautiful that I was like, you can't cast her as like village marm.
Yeah, she also doesn't jive with the older version of the mom. Obviously, everyone ages, but did you ever get a vibe that I never?
Yeah, I looked at the old woman. I was like, that's supposed to be Penelope Cruz.
That is word for word what Kelly said. She's like, she's supposed to be Penelope Cruz, but you were relieved. I was super apprehensive and I was ready to bristle. I was like, we are not doing this thing where his whole childhood has been a facade, a film. that he's directing, I was pretty annoyed when they panned back, and I was like, "What is this?" She's holding a boom mic. I'm enraged when they do this stylistic stuff, where they pull back the curtain, so to speak, and then they cut, and it went to black, and the credits rolled, and I was like, "Okay."
So that twist or reveal annoyed you?
It was about to. I was about to be mad, because if we were going to lapse into silly territory where this was going to be some kind of meta film within a film stuff, I was going to be upset. As it was, it didn't sit very well with me, but I accept it for what it was, and I can understand why that brief glimpse of a few seconds was justifiable.
The brief glimpse of a few seconds of the scene
of the boom mic girl,
okay.
And the fact that the Penelope Cruz and the boy, who was supposed to be him and his mother, showed that he was now returning to filmmaking.
Got it.
And this was maybe all we had seen all along was maybe the film that brought him back.
I thought that you were going to say that the brief glimpse and moment of the naked dude was all that you needed.
No. I did yell out wiener and balls when it came on the screen.
Well, he had to go not full frontal, but he had to like reveal that. Otherwise, like if he didn't see the bits, what would he be excited about?
The bits. I don't know. So we followed his childhood for a good long time, and ultimately I didn't know how much that impacted his later life. Yes, he has reverence for his mom, but I was waiting for us to be informed on how all these health issues hit him. When he sort of ran away and ran up the stairs and was defiant because he didn't want to go to the seminary, I said out loud, "Please don't throw yourself down the stairs." Like, what hurts his back so that he has all this chronic pain, right?
They seem to suggest that it was. I don't think he was sick. I think it was in his head.
Well, he definitely had a scar, and granted, it could have been that he was choking, but they found a discernible lump in his throat that they attributed to the bone protrusion, which they presumably fixed, and he was better, right? But when he was floating in the pool, he had a scar, and I thought it was a chest scar. I think it was on his back because of a spinal issue.
Yeah. So why did he, when he broke the surface, when he breached the surface, how come he wasn't breathing hard?
Because he was
under there for like minutes.
You can train yourself. Margot Robbie did it.
Yeah, and then you come up gasping because you haven't breathed for 5 minutes.
I don't know, because it looked good.
Stylistic choice?
There's not...
Like taking a breath underwater in Judy?
There's definitely a lot of stylistic elements.
These little moments like build, and you lose credibility as you go.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, I think that's how it works for me. I think that as a movie progresses, the more of these kinds of moments there are, the more credibility it loses for me, and then the more I distrust it.
There are tricks that they're employing, right? And I guess in a graduate sense, him being under the water was indicative of everything that was, filling his life, all the pain and how he was buried or whatever the case. But I think any frame of this movie could have been like a painting. And I can't say Diego Rivera because he's Mexican, but you know what I mean? It's infused with color. It's deliberately staged. It's lit so that there's the contrast and everything. And it all looks very picturesque, and it all looks cinematic in an international sense.
It looks cinematic and beautiful in every sense except for the direction.
So you feel like the direction was pedestrian?
So boring.
Really? The whole movie was boring?
I mean, the direction of it was just, it felt TV movie-ish. Like there was a scene where like he's walking his mom down the hallway, like, let's take a walk.
Yeah.
And it's like medium wide two shot, and he just like holds on it. Like it was kind of indicative of the whole thing where it's like wide shot, close up, like wide shot coverage, inserts, like very basic filmmaking.
Interesting, because I just sort of gave it a pass because of their styles that just don't typically represent American commercial movies. It's a very languid, sort of relaxed style that doesn't lend itself to, I'm preparing myself to be judged by my peers in this fast-paced Hollywood system kind of vibe. I get that this is a portrait, an autobiographical portrait, but we didn't know that going in. So in judging this movie critically based on the technical aspect of it, you can point to issues that you had with the direction, but storytelling is sort of where my focus will go.
Okay, let's talk about
for
storytelling.
this review. We spent a lot of time with the little boy, and I never really felt like that jibed. It felt like a separate set of characters rather than him as a child with his mother. Every time I saw the kid on screen, I had to remind myself, okay, this is not another character. This is supposed to be Salvador when he's young.
Yeah.
And you would think that all the flashbacks to his childhood would pay off. And I don't know that they ever did, aside from the fact that we culminate in the first desire, which leads me to think that the entire series of flashbacks was, in fact, the film that he was shooting about his childhood.
Right. But that's not revealed.
That's a little bit of a cheat, and a cheat that only hits you after the fact.
Right.
And it sort of validates in a way my feelings at the end. But I didn't feel cheated at the time. I was just waiting for it to connect, and it never really did.
Yeah. This movie is, storytelling-wise, very compartmentalized. And the compartments don't necessarily need to impact each other.
Excellent word. I would argue to differ. Is that a praise? Because the compartmentalization is the issue that I had the most with the movie. When you're telling an autobiographical story or a biographical story, you have to tell it in a way that's compelling narratively. Just because it's accurate doesn't mean it's good. We delve deeply into the story of him and the troubled relationship that he has with the actor.
Alberto.
And that dominates pretty much half of the movie. Alberto finally gets him to relent and hand over the script of Addiction, which he turns into a stage play. And then
A one-man stage play.
And that serves to introduce Federico,
who was so charming,
the lover. And then we never see Alberto again.
Right.
And that bothered me.
Yeah, because it's all compartmentalized. What bothered me, too, was how convenient it is. This film is full of convenient plot devices. One, the staging of Addiction conveniently is set up for Federico to just happen upon as he passes through Madrid. Two, he gets a mailer for the watercolor that is of him.
Yep.
These convenient plot devices build up and take me out of the film, decrease credibility, and make the whole thing feel convenient.
So the convenient connections that you're talking about, which did tie these elements of story together, the mailer that he received, which leads him to the gallery, which leads him to the memory of how his first desire drew the picture of him, right?
Right.
All that stuff felt tenuous to you, but that was the only threads keeping those disparate stories and compartments together.
So you can feel the crafting happening. You can see he's got, okay, I want to tell this story and this story and this story, and I'll just kind of conveniently stitch them together.
Okay. I did have issues with the compartmentalization, but I felt like I was grasping on those connections to justify my concerns. But maybe we're talking about the same thing. Maybe you're talking about how it stood out to you, how convenient all these things were, and I was complaining about how in the overarching story, these four compartmentalized pieces struggled to exist. Interesting. But I did like things about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the Alberto character. I didn't like him at first. He's kind of scummy looking, and he's got heroin all over the place. And he's, obviously, and we set the tone with a difficult relationship between the two of them, and they get into a fight over the Q&A on speakerphone. And then when he finally convinces him and he gets on stage, it was transformative. Like, I thought that guy was a really good actor.
Yeah.
I thought that it was a testament to his ability to be a scummy bathrobe-wearing dude that gets on stage and then blows it out of the water. And granted, he was sitting way too close to those people.
Sure.
But the movie in close-up on his face, tearing up and struggling not to cry, was really effective.
Even with Antonio Banderas' character having given him that direction, that an actor is someone who's trying not to cry,
is the most effective.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And that's a belief also carried by Almodóvar. You never go full crying. So the Alberto character was really effective, and I thought that as complex as that character may be, this guy deserves a place in this movie, and then he promptly disappeared.
Yeah.
Very frustrating.
Right.
So in a way, I think that if I had produced this movie and directed this movie or written this movie, which I didn't, I might have combined those two characters. I might have combined Alberto and Federico.
The lover?
In that he has a relationship with this actor who convinces him to separate himself and allow his work to stand on its own, and that would rekindle their relationship from the past. They would bypass all this complicated history. His play would be a success. They would find common ground again in their artistry, and then would reconnect romantically or whatever. Because the replacement of the Alberto character with the Federico character was jarring and disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
And while both of those guys were good actors, that compartmentalization showed.
Well, that certainly appeals to me from an efficiency standpoint. And I could see how it would be even more gratifying, I guess, to see them reconnect.
That leads me to the point that autobiographical filmmaking, it doesn't have to be completely literal. It has to be, you're right. Some dramatic license can be taken, and that dramatic license should lend itself to a narrative flow that feels comprehensive and satisfying.
Right.
Because when we lose characters and never address them again, but that was just a different part of my life. Right. Well, in a fictional storytelling, we can make that a part of a larger picture, because any one of these stories is more like a snapshot of a life. We get the sense of Salvador as a young boy, and he never ages in the course of that. It happens in a relatively short amount of time. Ditto for Salvador as an adult. Everything that happens in the space of what, a few months?
No, a few years, because remember they flash back to him caring for his mom.
Yes, so that again, it feels like a compartmentalized thing. It feels like a completely different thing, as though there are several short stories put together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you call them short stories, because that's essentially what he was writing right after he dropped out of his film career. He was still creative and still wrote, but he basically wrote these short stories or Addiction, which was adapted into a one-man play / monologue. They do feel short story-esque, which is probably reflective of what his creative, where his creativity took him after some real success as a filmmaker.
So it's pretty clear what our issues were with the film that gave us some reservations. But I think there's a lot of good here that's worth mining for.
Antonio Banderas,
who is a good actor that I didn't expect. He came here, and we get Zorro, and we get Puss in Boots, and we get Interview with the Vampire, and Once Upon a Time, El Mariachi, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and Desperado and stuff. And he was pretty much he's an expendable, for God's sake. But he was an action star here, and then to return to Spain and to star in an Almodóvar movie where he got his start and play a very subdued, reserved, almost repressed character.
Depressed,
and we're a lot in his face, a lot of close-ups in this movie.
There was a lot of great subtlety to his performance.
Yeah.
I love the way he approached heroin for the first time.
Just kind of cavalier.
Just like he's like, "Have you ever done it before?" And he was like, "No." And I feel like that's the way it happens.
I guess.
By the way, have you tried heroin?
No.
And if you were to try, have you tried any drugs?
No.
And if you were to try a drug, what drug would it be? Heroin.
No, just the addictive properties.
Hands down, heroin.
Why? That killed Lane Staley. It killed Kurt Cobain, more or less.
I mean, just one. You can just try it once.
No, that's the problem. It killed Scott Weiland. I don't think you can just try it once.
So you'd never try it?
I just feel like it's not worth it.
Coke?
I'm not searching for the thing that will change my life and make me feel better. I'm not trying to escape the deep-seated pain. I have food for that.
Isn't heroin an appetite suppressor?
I don't know. No fat heroin addicts have overdosed, as far as I know, unless they're doing it wrong from the outset. But Antonio Banderas he brought to this role a personal aspect. He had a heart attack a few years ago, which I didn't know about.
Oh, really?
And because he hasn't been super in the spotlight in American movies for a little bit. He's sort of aged out of the action role and aged right into the Expendables role. But that was his sort of niche, and he hasn't found his place yet in American cinema as an older actor in the way that Renee Zellweger has done recently for Judy, but this one might be the role. And certainly he received recognition from the American Academy for Pain and Glory for his role, but it's a completely different Antonio Banderas. And this may be controversial, but I will say that Antonio Banderas is I'm not being fair because I haven't seen him in this type of role before, but I think he's a better actor in his native language, in the same way that Shakira is a much better singer in Spanish than she is in English. Just the phrasing is different. She's more natural. She's more confident, and it comes across. And I think her voice is suited better for Spanish than it is for English.
More natural. He reminds me of a Spanish Gary Oldman.
Okay. I felt like Antonio Banderas in America is sort of one note. He's the action star under lowered brow.
Unfortunately, he kind of has to play the token, Spanish character.
In American movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's Assassins. He's been Zorro a number of times, and he's romantic. And he's Antonio Banderas. And he's not bad at all. And he does the intense Latin Ricky Ricardo type.
Yeah.
But it's one note.
Yeah.
And he's definitely not a one-note actor.
No.
Especially when he can inhabit a role like he does here with a director that he knows very well.
Yeah.
In his native country, in his native language.
He was so lovely and fragile with Federico.
Yeah. And so that speaks to Antonio Banderas' range, which I feel like I'd never fully appreciated.
But you know what I didn't like about his role? Or maybe it was just the character. Is I have a real hard time with modeling characters who are all bummed out for the first half or 2/3 of the movie. And I'm just dude, just pull yourself up, get it together, and get going.
Man, somebody's never had to deal with depression.
And sometimes this will happen in television shows where they're we're going to take 3 or 4 episodes and this person is just going to be really bummed out. And I'm oh, here we go.
You mean the entirety of Rent the Musical? Horrible. Sorry.
You know what musical I hate?
What?
La La Land.
I also hate La La Land.
Really?
Uh-huh. When you compare La La Land to Damien Chazelle, who just came off of Whiplash, you're what the hell is this?
I know. Whiplash was so good.
Yeah, and La La Land's so not good.
Not good. Wow, I really didn't expect you to hate that movie as much as I did.
Hated it.
That's weird.
Yeah. So maybe he chose his male muse in Antonio Banderas to represent his life in his arguably most autobiographical film. I don't know how many autobiographical elements were in his other films. Certainly they were there, especially about his mother. So then Almodóvar talked about how he didn't realize when putting this movie together that he would have to spend the next 18 months or so talking about himself and his personal life.
In promoting the film?
In interviews. And so that was a byproduct that he didn't anticipate. But he's worked with Antonio Banderas and Penelope Cruz a lot, and maybe no more fitting people to play him and his mother, respectively. But just in putting a movie together like this, I feel like he should have seen the issues in streamlining. And each of the vignettes, actually kind of my least favorite, was his mother, who we had sort of found the end of our use for. Him, relating to his mother in his formative years was not the same as caring for his mother and trying to carry out her final wishes. It was more about him just trying to apologize for being not the son that she always wanted, which is difficult, but I don't feel like it was a necessary component. I liked the child growing up in the cave and kind of trying to find himself. I certainly liked him and Alberto hashing out their qualms about working together professionally, and I liked his interaction with Federico when he finally showed up for that relatively limited interaction. The fact that he was in pain most of the time and the fact that he was severely addicted to drugs kind of colored all of those things, but not in a way that informed them enough to justify those 4 disparate parts sort of being in the same movie.
Yeah, I'm totally looking for a through line. And for a moment, I thought maybe drugs was it, but it wasn't a part of his childhood.
So what Kelly had pointed out was the informational part in the talking about how he was raised for his singing voice and his singing voice was fostered, and as a result he became a dum-dum because nobody fostered his education. He was totally lapsed in his studies of geography and anatomy. You remember all that?
Yeah, but then he was a smart kid who was a tutor.
Right. And so Kelly said, I like this movie. I didn't feel like that part was necessary. And it maybe is necessary in the fact that it is an additional component of the childhood story, the movie that he was telling about his childhood, but that is not this movie in whole. That's only in part.
Right.
And so the elements that he chose to represent in a comprehensive movie about his life spanning decades maybe didn't mesh together as well as I would have liked.
Yeah.
Still, all the other elements of this movie were convincing to me in a framework that didn't quite hold it up. It was like one of those picture frames where it's matted for you, and it has the little cutouts, and some of them are square and one of them is oval for some reason. And you put the pictures in together and they're meant to represent a whole, but they can, they're just pictures from wherever.
Right.
And not tied together by a unifying theme or whatever that would justify them being in this one frame. I did, though. I liked it. I think this movie was an all right movie.
What's your scale again?
My scale is nope and whatever, and those are below the line. Above the line for a passable movie are that movie was all right, or totally. You should totally go see that movie. So on that scale, it'd be maybe a 3 out of 4. A lot of good stuff about it, but some of the things that held it back in just the way that the story was told by piecing these components together not terribly effectively.
Does your line represent recommendation, not recommendation?
Yes.
So this is a recommended movie.
Yes, but it's not essential viewing. If you like Almodóvar's films, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you like Antonio Banderas, I can't see how you would be disappointed. Very pretty to look at. It's sustained my interest all the way through. Most of my reservations and questions came after the fact.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my scale is a little bit more brutal.
But you didn't like it. You got to say it. You set yourself up in this rating system.
Yeah, which I kind of regret.
Say it.
Boring. This is like so wrong that, because I don't think that whatever should be a part of your scale, because that's the name of our podcast. But it was kind of a whatever movie.
I mean, look, we've been reviewing award season movies, but I think by and large, most movies are whatever. And there's the dirt, and there's a whole lot of dirt.
It's really hard to make a movie.
More of the earth is made from dirt than diamonds, unless you go down to the core. But there's so much dirt to sift through, so that when you find diamonds, you treasure them.
Is that a Wesley original?
Yes.
It's pretty good.
Thanks.
Although you know how diamonds are formed, right? Incredible amounts of pressure.
Yeah. And that's pressure of the suckage all around them.
All right. Well, you heard it. And we had a lot more to say about Pain and Glory than I thought we would.
Yeah.
That's what we got. Let me know what you got. 818-835-0473. Leave us a voicemail or whatever, movies@gmail.com. Because, I want to...
Of our thousands of Patreon supporters and millions of listeners, we've only received relatively few, and don't be intimidated. We do want to hear from you because we love you.
We do. We love you. We thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. This is our ep on Pain and Glory. We'll see you next time.
Welcome, explorers of the human experience. This is Let's Talk Soul, and I'm your host, Claudia Monicelli. We're not afraid of the great mysteries of existence here. Soul versus consciousness, we're on it. Spirituality versus science, we've got that covered too. Join us in navigating these profound topics with wisdom, curiosity, and a dash of audacity. Whether you're a spiritual veteran or just starting your journey, Let's Talk Soul is your passport to the unknown. Let's Talk Soul, diving into the depths of the human spirit. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Miles, are you ready to record our promo for Season 2 of the Wanna Bet podcast?
David, have you ever seen a grown man naked?
Miles, we're not here to quote lines from Airplane. We're here to tell people that Season 2 starts August 18th.
But I like Airplane.
I know you do, but Wanna Bet is a sports betting podcast. Each week we bet $1,000 on the NFL teams and games that we love.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. And last year you picked over 60% of your games correctly.
How'd you do?
We're not talking about that. We are telling people that they can find us every Friday. So no more movie quotes.
Roger.
Electricast.